Hello, welcome to episode 5 of the Inspired Conversations with Coaches podcast, where I share interviews with heart-centered coaches to inspire you to unlock your true self so that you have a truly wonderful life. In this episode, we discuss mindfulness for everyday life, and my guest is Dr. Giles P. Croft, former NHS doctor, now a writer, speaker, and coach, helping everyday folk with their well-being and mental health. This is an unbelievable conversation, probably not what you're expecting from the mindfulness stuff that's out there already. So it's a very different take on it and a wonderful conversation. So let's go straight to the interview and enjoy. So- Hey Giles, welcome.
Oh yeah,
Good. So we've done the intro already, and great to have you here. And you've known you for quite a while now, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Okay. So the subject we've got is mindfulness for everyday life,
yeah,
and I want to start off really with because of just kind of might be people that are really attracted to the thumbnail or the title in Spotify thing. But what does mindfulness mean to you,
Hmm.
and how would you explain it to someone who is new to the concepts?
Oh well, my take on mindfulness is probably quite different from other takes on mindfulness, which is why I picked it as a topic because I want to sort of dispel some myths around it, maybe. And I think that the general take on mindfulness is being um, being we talk about having a mindfulness practice, don't we? So it's doing something regularly that allows us to become more present to life. So whether that is a hobby that we have,
Yeah.
or whether it is a kind of like a formal meditation or yoga practice,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, I think that the understanding of mindfulness is something that we do in order to become more present to life. So I suppose that might, people who are coming to it. I think if you looked it up on Wikipedia, that would probably be the definition of it. Yeah.
And what does it mean to you, though? So you said you have different. What was it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, for me, I don't have a formal mindfulness practice, but I would say that I maybe I spend a decent amount of the time living in a mindful state,
Mm.
and I think for me the key really is to get a better understanding of how the mind works, get a better understanding of how we are experiencing reality, that enables us to see that mindfulness, that state of presence, is our natural default state, and that there is literally nothing we need to do in order to experience that for ourselves. And if there's any effort involved, if there's any doing involved, it's going in the opposite direction. We
Yeah.
are innocently doing things and efforting our way away from that natural mindful state.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. So if
It's
it's
kind
in
of
your
like
innate,
turning it
if
on
it's
its
in your
head.
innate being, you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, if you've seen that, well, like, I mean, you can't. We're cutting straight to the quick, aren't we here? But if you've seen that, like, now is the only thing that you will ever experience in your entire life. You cannot experience anything but the present moment. Can you distract yourself from that actively? Of course you can. That's what the mind's all about. The mind is all about time. It's all about past. It's all about present. It's all about future. It's all about judgment and categorization and analysis, and all of those just serve to distract us from what you've just called our innate being, which is presence.
Mm. And so with when we talk about mindfulness then, for people, just do you feel- how does it differ from just simply being aware or paying attention? Because I think I've seen that from a commonality of people that kind of I've heard of mindfulness, but not really looked into it, or things. Yeah, but then it's just things like, oh, it's being in the moment or just listening. But how does it differ from being simply being aware and just paying attention, for example? What's the difference?
I don't know. I mean that's that's up to other people to decide, really. How do they define it for themselves? And again, it's very easy to get kind of bogged down in the rules and the regulations. I mean, I remember years ago I went to a seminar, an in-person seminar with a bit of a guru,
Mm.
and and everyone there seemed really happy, and I was going there because I wanted to be having a better experience of life, and it seemed like this guy was going to help me have a better experience of life. And he started off like he just like the literally his opening line was isn't meditation brilliant? And everybody went, whoa, yeah. And I instantly felt separate, and I felt wrong, and I felt inadequate, and I felt insecure because I tried those things. Like I was perceiving that there were a bunch of rules around mindfulness, about mindfulness is this or it is that or it is the other. And as soon as we do that innocently enough, then we've set ourselves a bit of a challenge. We've set ourselves something that we can fail at. And believe you me, I did try meditating a whole load of times, and I never really got on with it at all. And it was because of that misunderstanding, that it's not something outside of us. It's not something that we have to do. And maybe attention is like a byproduct of that understanding.
Mm.
Maybe every time we fall out of our thinking and back into our true nature, back into our innate being,
Yeah.
it, like one of the consequences of that is that we notice the things around us, and we're far more present, and we're taking in like way more data than we would be if our aperture was closed right down, and because we were entertaining a lot of thinking instead. So maybe, yeah, maybe that's the difference. Maybe it's attention is a consequence rather than a how to.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I remember when I first tried meditating, because when I was getting into coaching and stuff like that, and then I really struggled with it because it made me think more. Like my perception was I start meditating and everything would be quiet, and and I'll get some sort of divine inspiration. And actually, it was the opposite. I was just thinking about loads of stuff, and it's funny. I kept trying it and then not getting on with it, and it's sort of similar sort of stuff. Yeah, and it was only when um that someone specifically I tried to just sort of almost offhand just said, just let the thoughts come in and let them go,
Mm.
and that was kind of the turning point for me, if you like. And then actually, yeah, they can come in and I can let them go, and and it made me better at doing meditation, if you like, and for a long time I had to do guided meditation
Yeah.
to stop me thinking about other stuff, if you like. And that's interesting because I think with a lot of people that when they think of that mindfulness connected to meditation and they try it and they go, oh, it's just
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, mindfulness isn't for me. And it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like your essential nature is is this thing that we call mindfulness.
yeah,
It's happening all the time. Like here on this conversation already, I'm aware that like when you're talking, that every now and again that this is going, oh, this would be a good idea, oh, you should say this, oh, I know what he's talking about. And for me, everyday mindfulness is just knowing that is only ever going to distract me from the job at hand, which is to be present with Scott in this moment, and to just let what is being said wash over me. So, and that's got nothing to do with circumstances. It's got nothing to do with sitting quietly in the dark, and it's got nothing.
yeah,
There are no, there are no rules. It's just being, isn't it?
yeah. I did have a situation a couple of weeks ago where I was sitting with someone and we just finished playing golf, and I was sitting with someone at a golf course, and and I was being, I feel like myself there, totally in that moment, which taken a lot of practice to do over the years, but really good. I feel like, when I'm with someone in that moment, and um, and then I got a message later on, someone saying, oh, I saw you at Hainault Golf Club, and yeah, I walked past you, you just ignored. I said you didn't acknowledge me at all. I was like, I said, I just said, was I talking to someone? They said, yeah, you were sitting down talking to someone. I said, well, that's why I was I was with them, and
Yeah.
and I've had that a few times. I just kind of ignore people. It looks like I'm ignoring people because I'm just in, like in that moment. So it's a bit of a byproduct from that that's being annoying. But then it was really interesting that conversation we had with the this person was he goes, oh, I wish I could do that, so, so it was
Interesting.
really different, but that
Yeah.
flip of it, because I was just in that, obviously just fall into that moment. I didn't even
Yeah.
recognize this person that I knew
Yeah.
walking past.
Yeah.
So with the keeping mindful about the title, so mindfulness for everyday life. Um, what are some of the most significant benefits that people can experience from incorporating mindfulness into their daily routines?
Well, if we question the premise of the question itself there, which is I don't really think there's any incorporating anything into a routine at all. But what are the benefits of generally,
Mm.
being more mindful, if you like? I mean, I just think that we're as a species we're set up to thrive in reality. We're set up, and reality is the present moment. That's the only thing that we will ever experience. There isn't anybody on planet Earth who has ever experienced the future. The future's a thought that's happening now. There's, of course, we've all got pasts, but you can't actually experience the past.
Yeah,
It's a thought that's happening now. And for me, the more we see that, the more time we spend. Well, there's a paradox to that statement. The more time we spend being present, well, like being present, time's not even a thing.
mm,
It's, when we're in flow, it's been called lots of things, hasn't it? When we're presence or flow or in the now or
in the zone. Yeah,
rest in the zone or resting in our true nature, or whatever you want to call it. Time's not a thing. It's a place that's beyond space and time, and
mm,
it, it's being connected to the oneness of life, and like that has a ton of rewards. That's where uh, good ideas come from. It's where we're in touch with our intuition. It's where we have perspective on things. It's yeah, it's where insight comes just from completely out of the blue. It's where all the good stuff is.
yeah.
So I think
You're
that
operating at a completely different energy, aren't you? Yeah, completely different energy level.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and there's nothing, again, like the mind hears this and it goes, oh right, so what he's saying is it's wrong to be in our heads and that we should be more, and it's like again, no, that's just a story that the mind's made up. I think it's really seeing how it's all playing out. I think, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the work of Ian McGilchrist and the Master in His Emissary, and he talks about the left brain consciousness and right brain consciousness, and we've become so enamored with the mind, the intellect, analysis, judgment, calculation, prediction, planning, categorization. That those are all tools of the left brain. We've become so enamored with those that we've kind of um, we've really covered up all of the right brain characteristics that are far harder to describe because they all exist in that space that's beyond description. because description is a tool of the left brain. As soon as you start describing it,
Move
it's
to
not
left.
it. You're not in it.
Yeah,
So it is hard to talk about, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think McGilchrist posits that as a species we've lost sight of the implicit, and we've become so enamored with the explicit of the world of form
yeah,
that we fail to see that actually form comes from the formless.
mm,
Form comes from the formless, and we're so obsessed with all of the outputs that we fail to see where they're actually coming from.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. And I'm quite aware that the people that might get drawn to the title of this podcast, potentially people that are um suffering from if like stress, anxiety, um, emotional overwhelm in everyday life, because we've got mindfulness for everyday life. Um, what's the um how can the mindfulness help someone that's there? So someone's come here there because they've been attracted because they say they're suffering from stress, anxiety, and everyday overwhelm. What would be your sort of thoughts around how mindfulness can really help them?
So for me, and I want to make it clear that if someone's listening to this and they enjoy meditating and they enjoy practicing mindfulness and they derive benefit from it, and like I say, they enjoy it, then don't stop doing it. Do what makes sense. Do what makes sense. People who have tried it and have got benefit from it will see that they'll have a different relationship with the thinking
Mm,
that they have, of the stressful thinking that they have, of the anxious thinking that they have. It allows them to kind of like get some distance from it. I suppose the subtle but really empowering way that I see it differently is that um, thought in and of itself is completely harmless. That's a quote from Richard Carlson there. Thought in and of itself is harmless, and that puts an entirely different spin on the whole world of mindfulness and meditation, and feeling like we need to do something about thought, because that's kind of the premise, isn't it? It's like,
mm,
okay, well, I've identified that I've got these thoughts that I don't like. What am I going to do about that? That's the way that we've kind of been brought up to believe that it all works. What am I going to do about it? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll meditate. I'll get some distance from that harmful thinking. Or if we look more to the medical model, then it's like, well, I'll go and have a course of CBT.
mm,
Or I'll have some NLP, some neuro linguistic programming around this. Or I'll have some hypnosis, because yeah, thoughts bad. I've got these thoughts and I don't like them, and they're not helping me, and they're restricting me, and they're limiting me. So what am I going to do about that? Well, if you really see, if you really see insightfully for yourself that you get a totally different prospect, a totally different perspective on it. That actually those thoughts are neutral, that they're completely harmless, that they arise and they pass, and the only time they're ever gonna become a problem is when we make them a problem, when we give them a power that
yeah,
they don't actually have. And that seems counterintuitive. It's like, well, hang on, if I have a thought that I'm not good enough, if I have a thought that I'm a useless shit, it's like, well, um what you're telling me, that there's no truth to that whatsoever. Surely there's a nugget of truth there. But when we see that these are just all a very natural byproduct of the mind just doing what it does, it's just like this computer that's just processing stuff via our conditioning. it's just like a data in, data out model. It's going to come out with stuff. It's got a negativity bias. It's like a hangover from the cave people, the cave dwelling days. It
Yeah.
made sense to evolve this negative bias with thinking. But when we get a different relationship with thought, and we see that thought in and of itself is completely harmless, well, then there's no need to do anything about it at all because it's harmless.
Mm.
And that's a totally different proposition. That's like, well, do I need to meditate? Well, no, I don't. Do I want to? Do I like really enjoy it? Fine. I mean, I do things that could be considered mindfulness practice, like going out on bike rides, and being out in nature. Those are great ideas of things to do, but I don't do them in order to quiet my mind, because I know that my mind will quiet itself when I stop believing that it's got a power over me that it just doesn't have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the, I think from saying that, that's the important is understanding that, or that belief that it hasn't got that power on you, isn't it? And giving power to them thoughts and negative self-talk is,
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, it's bloody convincing, and I fall for it all the time. I fall for my thinking all the time. There'll be moments where I just can't see that I'm believing my own thinking here. And some things are, well, it looks like it's an exception to the rule. Well, it's all well and good. Remember Michael Neal saying once something like, the because we talk about, inside out versus outside in. Is it the world that's making us feel a particular way outside in, or is it actually, are those feelings coming from inside us, and as a result of our state of mind in any given moment, that's being reflected outwards into the world and is
yeah,
creating the reality that we see. And I remember him joking once, saying, the inside out understanding, it's completely inside out except for my wife and my bank balance. Because
really.
there's just some area, we've all got blind spots, and we've all
Yeah,
got bits of our life that we struggle
yeah,
with. And it helps to know what's going on in those situations. It helps
yeah,
to know that even if we can't see it in that moment,
yeah,
even if it really looks like a genuine problem,
mm,
just knowing that it's not, knowing
yeah.
that it is just
I mean, that's the thing for that's helped me over the years is the when I really got into it and particularly did a lot of work with Louise, for the
yeah,
from sort of the clarity background as well.
yeah,
Is that you're for me understanding that I've got that choice of creating my own reality. And it's almost that thing where you can go, well, I've got a choice from that. It's like and I can ignore that thought. But
mm,
I can choose how I create my own reality. And I would say even the wife and baby balance, you create your own relationship with them too as well. During your outbeat, So, but the but that was a big thing of me knowing that I've got that choice, if you like, that I can rather than it happening to me, I can create what reality I want on the outside. And
I, I there's a lovely metaphor that I use with clients, which is trains of thought, and um, there are we're on the platform. Who we are is the observer, who we are is the witnessing of these trains of thought, and we get on the trains of thought, and they take us in a particular direction. And sometimes we don't notice that we've
yeah,
got on a train of thought. And it's in that moment where we notice that we're on a particular train of thought. That's where we have that choice to, I can stay on this train of thought. I'm more than welcome. But I know where it goes.
yeah,
Or we
I
can
can
come back
that's the
to
next
our
stop. Yeah,
essential nature. We can get off
yeah,
and go back to the platform, and another train will come along. That's the nature of thought, is that it's constantly giving us
yeah.
fresh perspectives on things.
Not only is that a great thing, it would also make a great short, I think, in the future. Good.
Glad to be serving your content machine.
Yeah. So with again, we kind of with then where we've got to where obviously this fault and then where we are with mindfulness. How does it how does it improve your focus? And I think for people like who go to the other complete way, focus, productivity, decision making, particularly in a busy life, because a lot of people got busy lives now, haven't they? And yeah, so how can it improve that them areas of a busy life which tend to be, can we improve your focus, productivity, and the decisions we make, to get on what train of thought?
So, I mean, it's. I'm going to write those three down because they're three separate propositions, really. So we've got focus, productivity, and what was the third one?
Yeah,
Decision
decision making.
making.
Yeah.
Decision making. Oh God.
Now the
Right.
three things that I would sort of, towards a
Yeah.
in a busy life, if you like,
Yeah.
that
All
I
right.
can improve them
Hey,
three things.
how long have we got? So focus. I mean, for me, focus is focus is our experience of life. Whatever we're focused on, that's the reality that we're going to get. So if we're focused on the job in hand and we're not really entertaining our thinking, we're not really paying it much attention, like, you and I are kind of focused on this conversation right now. I am aware that every now and again, the mind will have some stuff to say, and I'm just like whatever, and I'm letting it pass on through, and I'm carrying on being focused on the conversation. So focus. Whereas if we were, um, um, if I was very much focused on, I don't know, how I was coming across,
Mm,
or the way I looked, or something, then that's going to be my experience. That's going to be the reality that I experience. And as a result of my state of mind in that moment, as a result of where my focus is, that's going to affect my behavior.
mm,
That's going to affect my behavior. If I'm really focused on how I'm coming across, I'm going to get all insecure, and I'm probably going to,
mm,
struggle to talk coherently, and I'm going to want to try and put across a particular. Well, it's important that the people watching this have a particular way of seeing Giles, of how he is, and so I'm gonna, I don't know, I'm going to censor myself, or I'm going to, behave in a way that's not really all that authentic. Okay, so focus, where our focus is, whether it's on our focus is on life, or our focus is on our insecure thinking, which is pretty innocent and it's a very natural human thing to do, and we all do it, and I do it at times as well. Then what the results that we get are going to be different.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
No,
that,
having a clear, so that, yeah, how it improves it is having that clear clarity, if you like, and
yeah, it's,
yeah,
not being as caught up in the rules of the mind.
mm,
The mind is
I like that.
so rules based. It's like, well, it's
Yeah,
got to be this or it's got to be that. It's very black and white.
yeah,
It's very, well, it observes what's going on and it extrapolates as a result of that, and it goes, well, this is just the way things are.
yeah. And I suppose
It's
if you get
always going
caught
to
up
be
in the
like this.
balls of the mind, you're you ain't doing what what you've been conditioned to do. So all of those things we've been conditioned through childhood and things is all going to show up, isn't it, in that moment? And
Yeah.
because that's where you're setting your rules from, I suppose, from how
Yeah,
you.
of course. Yeah, yeah. And the answer isn't to necessarily to try and tackle those head on, because, at the end of the day, what are you gonna, what's the only tool you can really use to tackle all of that thinking? Well, it's more thinking, isn't it? The answer
But
is to get.
mindfulness can help it by clear, by
Yeah,
having that.
exactly. Yes, getting a bit of distance, getting a bit of perspective on it, getting a
Mm,
bit of perspective on it. Sure, observe. There'll be language that I use that's very particular to me and my conditioning, and and that's fine. It's seeing again that it's harmless. Really, that conditioning coming out in us, it's harmless, and there's nothing that we need to do about it per se.
Sure.
So that was focus. Productivity, I think.
Yeah.
Again, if we see flow and creativity um, as almost like our default,
Mm.
we are creative beings. There was nothing, and then there are these words. There was nothing, and then there was this podcast. We are creative beings. Our entire experience, this experience that you and I are having right now. I've got this, what looks like a computer screen in front of me. That's just data. That's just like pixels of dancing colored light in front of my eyes. There is no computer screen there. That's just data that's going in, and that the creation that it's being created from the inside out. If there was somebody sat right next to me here in front of the same screen, they'd be having a different experience. Because their inner world is being created for them as well. So if we see that, like, we are creative beings, and that's going to be happening whether we like it or not, then really we see that the only thing that we can ever really do is kind of put the brakes on that.
No.
And what do we put the brakes on with? We put
Yeah.
the brakes on by being distracted by our thinking
Right.
and our insecurities, and again, the rules and regulations that the mind comes up with. Oh, I can't do that because. Oh, well, if I do this, then this, that, and the other's going to happen, and
Mm.
that just puts a lid on our creativity. That puts a lid on our productivity.
Mm.
Um, when you look at procrastination, we see procrastination as a problem, and it's not a problem at all. It's a solution. It's the best thing that the mind can come up with for a situation where we're faced with the unknown. Oh, I've got this thing to do. I don't know how it's going to turn out. The mind then creates a whole bunch of problems. It's like, oh, well, what's probably going to happen is that it's going to go wrong and you're going to feel terrible.
Mm.
Well, nobody wants to experience that. So what does the mind do? Well, it solves its own problem that it's created by procrastinating. Oh, I know, I'll have a quick play on that video game so that
Mm.
I don't have to think about the future and how I'm going to feel in the future. But we innocently don't see that that's just a story that's being created by the mind in the first place. So, getting a better relationship with our thinking, having a better understanding of how it's all working, means that we just don't need to take that stuff into consideration. I
Mm.
can, I can, I can observe that the mind has a story about how this task is going to go. I can see that it's completely made up and it's not based in reality at all. It's just my conditioning coming out,
Mm.
and I can crack on and do it anyway. I don't have to wait to feel a particular way. And because I do a lot of writing, and so this is like happening on a daily basis for me. I've set myself a daily deadline. For somebody who said that a few years ago that they don't really like deadlines and stuff, I've gone the other way completely, because I write a daily email newsletter now. So I've got a 24-hour deadline every single day. So
I
I'm
can
I'm
imagine
up
that
against.
structure now because I remember when we first met.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks again. Oh, every single one of these conversations. Thanks, Scott. So yeah, productivity wise, I can see that productivity is my natural state.
Mm.
Okay, and or the only thing that I can do is actively get in the way of that by putting the brake on it, by believing all of the thinking that I have around this task that I'm currently engaged in. And I don't have to do that, and I can sit and I can just start writing and see what happens. And then, just funnily enough, most of the time, what usually happens is I just
Right, yeah.
automatically get into flow and I start writing, and the piece
Yeah.
appears. So, yeah, that's how it for
Mm.
me, that's how it shows up.
Cool. Was very on decision making, wasn't it? And
Oh my word! Well, decision making's another thing entirely. Oh gosh, because you've got to ask yourself a bit. the biggest what if. Here we go. We're doing video, aren't we?
oh,
What
there
if
you
I
go.
have this, but I
And
have
with
this.
props.
I I have this
Props.
beside me at all times because this one the mind really doesn't like. This one the mind really doesn't like. What if there's no such thing as a decision?
Ooh,
What if there is no such thing as a decision? What if life is happening?
well,
What if life is happening? The mind is observing what's happening in life. It's creating a story out of that. And part of that story is that there is a future like this and there's a future like that.
mm,
And that I'm going to feel this way in this future and I'm going to feel this way in this is. And it is literally us getting caught up in that thinking in that moment that makes it look like, like there's a decision to make.
wow.
That's going a bit deeper, that one.
So,
We're into the
yeah,
realms of free will and whether or not it exists or not.
but it's kind of trying to say without us going into complete tangent really, but the but I think it's kind of the where that's you've almost described therefore the power of mindfulness to even think that,
Mm.
to even think of that possibility that that mindfulness has created, to be able to even to think of that, as a possibility of that there is no decisions. And then you're just, I suppose, your whatever path, then your perspective changes, doesn't it, compared to wherever you.
Yeah, I mean it it's not something I can get my head round, I have to say. It's not something I'm sure I can ever really understand. What I always encourage my clients to do is to look to their own experience and to maybe look at some of the decisions that it looks like they've made over throughout their lives in the past, and well, what was it that really led to that decision? How involved do you really think you were? I know a lot of the kind of like the big changes that have happened in my life where I've made a decision, for instance, to like leave a particular career or start something completely new. It really looks like there was a decision there, but when I look back on it, it's like, well, no, there was a moment where things looked a particular way,
Mm,
and then there was a moment where things looked different, and as a result of things looking different, I went down a particular path, and I didn't really have much to do with that at all. If I could control seeing things differently, I'd be seeing things differently all the time to get myself a better and better and better experience. But I don't really have that control.
mm,
And that, for me, that's where these shifts come from. They come from us getting a different perspective.
mm.
And again, if we're going to bring this back into the world of mindfulness, that's the sort of thing that only really happens when we're present to life, when we're
Yeah.
open to possibility,
Mm,
when we're not caught up in the stories saying, if this, then that. If we're not caught up in the mind's algorithms, then we're way more open to this thing that is unexplainable, the serendipities happening, the coincidences, the just being drawn kind of like in a particular direction.
mm.
And that's got nothing to do with decision making. Decisions are just a mind observing observing what's going on and having a debate with itself. It's just having a debate with itself.
Mm. It's really made me think a lot deeper actually about it. But it's interesting the I don't know experience itself with the going back a few years now. Funny enough, just before it was interesting how it turned out because it was just before we got a dog.
Mm,
Right. So I generally I'll go in for daily walks as part of I did with the 75 hard the Andy Frizzell thing at the time, and doing the evening exercise was for me was a daily walk. But and I live out in the sort of northwest Essex, but in the sticks, and there's fields everywhere where I live. I'm quite fortunate in that sense. We're living in part of nature in the not too far out of London and all that. But I did a thing where the walks I lived here for already sort of 7 or 8 years at that point, and not really explored much of the surroundings in terms from a nature perspective. So I did with my nightly walks where I just walked for a certain time in any direction.
Mm,
My only intuition was that every night when I went out, it kind of walked in a different way than I walked the night before. Right? And just walked, that was the only kind of decision that when I got to certain points like junctions, right? Well, I walked that way last night, so I'm going to walk this way. And then when the time had come on, then I just walked back, right? Um, so it was very much from even though I didn't realize at the time, a very mindfulness state.
mm,
And that was interesting. Was the my perspective changed around all because I found all of these different great walks and nature right on my doorstep, you know.
mm.
And then so it was the serendipity, the thing that it was almost like life was preparing me for when we get the dog. So when now I've got loads of different walks that I take Bear on each day, so we're not on the same walk every day, it's a different walk. And because I've got all this knowledge, if you like, all these different walks there, and it was very for much from um a mindfulness state at the time where just really just my only decision that I felt I was making was not to do what I did last night,
Yeah.
and it was more about walking towards well, the perspective of the timer. So when the alarm went, just started
Turn
heading
back
back,
into
and
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, that's quite interesting. Um, yeah, it sort of blew me away with that answer. So we're going away from there. The if we come back to a little bit then of the try and come back to a little bit about it, if you
Yeah,
like.
bring it
Yeah,
back. Bring
yeah,
it back quick, Scott.
bring back
We've got too far.
to
We've
the
blown people's minds. Quick.
yeah. The and
Bring
keep
it
it on
back to
topic.
mindful breathing.
Yeah, keep on the topic of the title if you like. And,
Yeah.
there's definitely a
Yeah, you started it, mate.
I know,
You asked me the
but that's
question.
what I wanted with these podcasts to go in because I knew that it's interesting that I put the topics out and then people said that, but and they said, oh, I might want to talk. I said, it will go into other areas. I know,
Yeah.
that's the whole good. That's what makes it interesting. But I wanted to be again the people that will get attracted to this around practicalities of start. Where can they just start? What can they if someone hasn't done mindfulness before, that they like the idea of it, they've heard of it, they keep hearing it popping up. So the universe is saying something to them about, look, you need to try this mindfulness thing.
Mm.
We've opened up their mind a little bit, obviously, with the conversation so far. But
Mhm.
where's their starting point from, as from a practical application of where can they start practicing? How can they start practicing?
Well, again, I'm sorry to disappoint, but I'm gonna question the validity of that entire question because I don't think that there's anything to practice at all. But you're regretting having me on now, aren't you?
No,
But
not
I
if I
think
wanted to.
to I think if somebody wants to get stuff, if somebody wants a change, if somebody feels drawn to this topic,
Yeah.
like they intuit
Well, not so much
on
practicing
some
then. Where's the starting point
yeah
for
on some level that that presence, being more present to life, is a good thing. Okay, if someone's drawn to that, well, I would suggest that as a starting point, that they start looking in the direction in which I have been pointing for the last half an hour or so. That they start looking to better understand the nature of the experience that they're having. Because I mean, I run like a monthly online meetup, and the strap line for that is to experience well-being. There's nothing to do, only something to see.
Mm.
And really, it's even the notion that we have to do something in order to experience our well-being. Well, if our well-being is our default natural state that we always come back to, when we're not, every time we fall out of our thinking, every time we're not paying attention to the insecure mind, then there's nothing to do. The doing aspect is the getting all caught up in our thinking. That's the bit that's why people are exhausted all the time, because they're thinking themselves silly. So where do people start? Well, I would, there are a ton of resources There are a whole load of books and podcasts, and I mean, I write a daily newsletter. I know how easy it is to be tricked
Mm.
because the illusion is really strong. It really looks like our this thing that we call reality, this thought generated perceptual reality. It really looks like that's the truth. It really looks like that's objective reality, and it's never not going to.
Mm.
We're set up this way, and so I would start to question that, start looking in this direction. If this conversation has had you for, there's been any point during this conversation of you watching or listening, and you've gone, hey, no, I'd never really thought of it that way. Then yeah, then follow that. Okay, follow that.
There'd be a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of-
Follow that.
yeah.
There are I've got books,
Mm.
books and books and books. There is books like Just as Thought by Amy Johnson. There's Clarity by Jamie Smart. There's The Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal. There's Instant Motivation by Chantal Burns. There's A Little Piece of Mind by Nicola Bird. And all of these books, they're all written from this understanding, because it is an understanding. It's an understanding of
Yeah.
how we're experiencing the world. And it's an understanding that absolutely changes everything. Like, I'm being awkward, and I'm throwing every single question back at you and saying, well, hang on a minute, the question's wrong though, isn't it? There's an assumption in the question that people need to start practicing something. Well, what if that's not the case? What if that's not the case? And all those books I've just mentioned, all come from this understanding. If
Mm.
you like the cut of my jib, and you think that, well, I quite like the way that the metaphors that Giles uses, or the way that he explains. I don't understand it at all, but there's something in there that makes a lot of sense. Well, sign up to my newsletter. I send out like a
We'll put
day
the
a day.
we'll put the link.
We'll put the link in. Yeah, because I know it. I call it the Daily Reminders newsletter, because I know how easy it is to get tricked,
Mm.
and yet there's evidence. You've got to look for your own evidence. So, in terms of practical steps, for me, it's almost like this has to make sense to you to start with.
Mm.
If you've got this far and you're still listening or watching, if it didn't make sense to you, I suspect you'll have switched off already. You'll have gone, that guy's talking a load of rubbish, and you won't have, it just won't have resonated with you at all. If you've got this far and you're like, there's something there, isn't it? Well, then, follow that. I think it has to make sense. Read a book, listen to a podcast, get the daily reminders,
Mm.
and then start looking for the evidence in your own life.
Yeah.
Start looking to see through the illusion of your thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of that, there's a lot of what you said today, and even just that in there was is a little bit of that self-awareness, isn't it? Allowing yourself to catch yourself, things like that, and I think, and mindful is like that when you're just getting into it, that picking up on, like, being aware of what your thoughts are, yeah, because you say you can't, it never stops. You
No,
could be. I feel that I quite comfortably live a mindfulness sort of kind of experience most of the time, but there's still a lot of thoughts come in. You say things and there's like, oh, thoughts about the next question or whatever like that and things. There's loads of thoughts that come in. Mind, and then when we pick up on things, you might say, wife or balance, if you say things like that, then you get other thoughts. Or I start thinking about, I talks about, the dog walks. I was thinking, well, that quick little thought of, or got to take barefoot walk later on, but then, and so it's really that lot of self-awareness in there, isn't there, of what your mind's thinking at that time.
yeah, okay. So, and here's a really good, straightforward, practical bit of advice. Don't try and police your thoughts.
Mm.
Don't try and police your thoughts. Don't try and be aware of your thoughts. We've got this beautiful inbuilt wisdom in the system that is like a little alarm system for us, and it's called our feelings. It's
Mm.
called our feelings. Our feelings are, if just like very, very logically, if the only thing we can ever experience is now, Okay, so we can't experience the past. We can't experience. We can certainly think about the past and we can think about the future, but we can't ever experience them. The only thing that we can experience now, and if what we're experiencing now is this thought-created perceptual reality, that has a feeling to it.
Mm.
That has a feeling to it in any moment, and that's what our feelings are telling us. Our feelings are this like rock solid, airtight reflection of our thinking in the moment. It's like the character of the thinking. So if I'm feeling angry in any particular moment, that's because thought is taking an angry form in that moment. Okay,
Mm.
it's got nothing to do with the situation. I know it looks like that. That's an illusion. That's a trick of the mind. If I'm feeling sad, it's because thought is taking a sad form in the moment. So we don't need to get into the details of what we're thinking. I think that's where people go wrong, because again, that's giving thought a power that it simply doesn't have. When we start digging into all the details, we just get into a loop of more and more and more thinking. And so the whole sort of catching yourself is really being in tune with the feeling that you're in moment to moment. It's like, well, if we go back to the train of thought metaphor on it, it's like, oh, I've got this feeling, I've got this feeling of tension, I've got this feeling of stress. Oh, that must mean I'm on the stress train. That must mean I'm on the tension train. Oh, I can get off that. I can get off that. I can come back to the present moment. I don't even need to be aware of what the thinking is. I just know, because I've seen insightfully for myself, because I've been exploring this for a little while.
Mm.
I know that my feelings are a reflection of thought, and whenever I'm present to life, being present feels pretty good, doesn't it? All
Mm.
things considered. It's got a nice, it's not super exciting and it's not super dramatic and it's not horrible and it just kind of is. It's just like this feeling of kind of like, being home in some way. And because it is kind of being home, really, it's being who we really are.
Yeah.
And that's got a feeling for it. And anytime we're not in that feeling, it's a little like tap on the shoulder to say, whoa,
Yeah.
buddy, I don't know what it is you're thinking about, but you're probably off in the future worrying about something, or you're probably having regrets about the past, or you're probably in judgment about how you are or who you are or something. And it all comes back to the feeling. So yeah, practical advice: don't try and police your thoughts. Like vigilance, you'll end up with OCD. You really will. If you try and police your thoughts all the time, that way madness lies. Honestly, so just be more in tune with the way that you're feeling moment to moment.
There's something blissful in that as well, because I think even when things happen during the day, that being in that moment of the feeling, it's kind of then like when good things happen, you can experience proper, true gratitude for it in that moment. And whereas when you forget about some good things that have happened, if you like, during the day or things because you're too busy worried about, school run and dinner and stuff like that. But there can be it could be something like a random act of kindness that someone's done, even if it's to like, open a door or, let you into a parking spot, whatever like that. And being in that moment, like you said, is the bit that feeling. It allows you to kind of, well, for me anyway, it allows me to kind of experience a lot more grateful for, gratitude for stuff
Mm.
during the day, of the little stuff that would, if I was doing gratitude at the end of the day, for example, then I would have forgotten about that. I wouldn't
Yeah,
into
yeah.
everything.
Again, I think gratitude is one of those things that's built in and arises very naturally when we're present. It's funny, when we're present, it just seems like there seems to be a lot to be grateful for,
Mm.
because life's actually pretty cool. It's like, um, I wrote an article recently called "Gratitude for the Heart of Journaling." I was working with a client who we started off, and she said, don't you dare suggest I do gratitude journaling, because I've tried that and it doesn't work." And no, if we're doing it, this goes back to the everyday mindfulness thing again, because if we're under the illusion that we have to do something in order to feel better, if I'm doing a gratitude journal in order to feel gratitude, it's just not going to work.
I
I
suppose
mean, I
you're enforcing you're enforcing that feeling of I'll only be happy when, I suppose.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's all a mind story. Yeah,
Yeah.
and and as soon as we like start forcing ourselves to like, right, well, what am I going? I mean, I've tried it in the past. I tried gratitude journaling for ages. I, got an app and I did it for about 6 months. And by the end of the 6 months, I literally couldn't think of anything to be grateful for at the end of every day. It was just like it was a miserable experience, and it just seemed to reinforce everything that was missing in my life. Because if we again, we're going a little bit deeper. All we're doing is we're setting up a duality there. As soon as we say, well, I am grateful for A, B, and C, there's an underlying subtext to that, which is, I cannot be happy without A, B, or C.
Exactly.
you know, that's not how it works. Again, it's a trick of the mind. Gratitude is something. I'll tell you when I feel grateful, Scott. I feel grateful every time I catch myself on a train of thought and I get off.
Mm.
Every time I catch myself, every time I'm in tune with my feelings, every time I get that helpful reminder of stress. Stress is helpful. Stress is telling me, hey, buddy, you've slipped out of reality and you're off in a story again. You're off in a story. Don't know what the story is. I mean, sometimes it's really obvious because it's like, you've got a deadline or something and you find yourself worrying about the deadline. Hey, buddy, you know, stress is here as a friend. It's a gift. It's telling you that you're not present to life, that you're not in life at the moment. You're in your head. You're in a story, and that's where your feelings not coming from the future, because that's not possible. Time travel's not possible. Those feelings of stress are coming from stressful thinking in the moment, and you don't have to do that. You can let go of that anytime you like. And so it's like it's an instant stress cure. Seeing where stress is coming from, seeing that it's thought in the moment, getting off that train, coming
Mhm.
back to the present moment. Oh God, for a minute then, I was taking that really seriously. I was, well, I feel grateful every single time that happens, because yet again, I have seen through the illusion of my thinking and I've come back into reality. That's where my gratitude comes from.
Powerful. Like that. Is this show up a lot of in the work that you do with your clients? Is it?
This is everything I do with my clients. I don't, it's like I don't. I've just seen time and time again that when we look upstream to the way that reality is being created, it just explains everything that's going on downstream. Like mental health conditions, as they're all just coping mechanisms. They're coping mechanisms for a misunderstanding that thought is harmful.
Mm.
It's all like every weird and wonderful behavior that we do, every habit that we don't like, every
Yeah.
bit of procrastination, it's all wisdom in the system, doing its best to bring us back to the present moment, doing its best to bring us back to reality. And the more we see how it actually works, the more that we see we don't need to do any of those things, that these are all unnecessary habits, that it's actually built into the system that we will rebalance when we get this better relationship with our thinking, when we stop taking it so seriously, when we stop giving it power that it simply doesn't have. Well, habits, mental health conditions, they just go away on their own.
Mm.
They just go away on their own. So yeah, this is how I tackle everything.
Yeah.
This is my whole
And I think
practice.
that's where people do exploring mindfulness, where they're probably seeing the mindfulness with the well-being and the health benefits and all that being sort of appreciated to it. But when we've probably taken people right down a rabbit hole with this conversation. But it's been a
Good.
wonderful conversation, and I knew it would
If
be
you're
with you.
still here, well
I knew it would
done.
be a simple one. So absolutely fantastic. Um, I have to tell people you don't need don't want to come on this podcast. You don't need a beard and glasses and a
Yeah, and a navy blue t-shirt.
but something I want to end on this sort of kind of question for you, really, or for you to give us some stories really around the bear in mind, so it's everything like what you say, like with how you work with your clients, but what are some transformational sort of moments that you've witnessed as a result of this through people?
Good grief, everything. I mean, it's like it still now constantly astounds me about the changes that I see in my clients. Like that, and my clients will come out. You know, it's one of the reasons I love this work so much is because it's like I'm not providing my clients with any solutions or suggestions or prescriptions or anything. And I've just seen that when we look in this direction, when we look to reality and how it actually works and how we work as human beings, the insights that they have, this is not something that I could come up with at all.
You feel you're just guiding them to that?
Yeah, just like because we like as humans, we're pointed in the wrong direction. You know, we've got this misunderstanding about how our minds work, and it means we're looking in the wrong direction. We're looking for coping techniques. Well, what if there's nothing to cope with? What if there's nothing wrong? You know, and to a mind, that's profoundly insulting. But when you point people in the opposite direction, they have insights about their situation, that because it's their situation and not my situation, that they have these profound insights. And I just, you know, there was one yesterday. I'm not going to go into the details because it's private, but the insight that they had, it floored them. It floored me as well. I was like, what? How the hell did you get to that? You know, it was like, but it completely changed. You know, all of a sudden they were like, oh well, that's a completely different prospect. You know, this is someone who'd been struggling with a mental health condition for years and years and years and years, and you know, like felt they were at last chance saloon, and they came to
Yeah.
me, and they're like, oh, 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 well, that's a totally different prospect. And like that's music to my ears. I'm like, yeah, well, let's go from there. Let's go from there. And then what I suspect will happen is, you know, the symptoms that they're having will go away. So, you know, habits, that it's amazing what happens with habits. I remember like right at the beginning of my journey, there was somebody who I got into conversation with on social media who said that they had a 35-year long habit of like picking, and they would pick at
Uh-huh.
the edges of their fingernails until they got infected, you know, like, and they couldn't stop it, and they tried everything. They tried hypnosis, CBT, NLP, they tried absolutely everything. And I I suggested a book to them. This is all I did. I suggested a book to them. I was like, "Hey, you should have a read of this book." I think it was Amy Johnson's Little Book of Big Change, which, you know, is like very much this understanding as applied to habits. And she got back to me a week later on social media. I didn't even have a conversation with her or anything, and she said, "Oh, I've just stopped. I've just stopped. It just doesn't make sense anymore." And that's the change.
Mm.
It's that, you know, as human beings, we're always doing what makes sense to us. We're doing what makes sense on the basis of our understanding of how it all works. Well, when you change the understanding of how it all works, what makes sense to do changes automatically on its own. It used to make sense to me to drink alcohol regularly.
Mm.
You know, it used to make sense to me at the end of a day to reach into the fridge and have a beer or two or three. It used to make sense. Alcohol's a fantastic way of helping us to settle our thinking. Just got a few side effects, that's all, you know, and it's rather expensive and damaging. Um, and uh, but then the more I saw around this understanding, the more I saw that my well-being is innate.
Oh.
That the good feelings aren't coming from the beer. The good feelings are coming from a quiet mind, and there's nothing that we need to do to have a quiet mind but let go
Mm.
of our busy minded thinking, of seeing through its importance, Well, once I saw that, it just didn't make sense to drink anymore, and so I stopped drinking, and I've not touched. I've not even want. I again like these things about decision. Like that wasn't a decision I made, Scott. That was like one day. One day, I loved alcohol. Like I could not even contemplate the notion of. I'd done like dry Januaries, I'd done extended periods where I'd not drunk for like 4 months, but it was all willpower, and I always caved in at the end of it. This was something completely different. This
Mm.
was one day I really loved alcohol, and the next day it just didn't make sense to drink it anymore, and I've just like I've not had a single moment where I've even wanted a drink. So that though that's the nature of the change that we're talking about here. So it can be anything. I've seen all sorts change. I've seen all sorts change.
Fantastic. And a fantastic note to end the conversation on. As always, when we talk, we could go on for hours and hours.
Yeah.
So there might be a part two to this, especially some of the things that I think you're gonna send me down a rabbit hole. Might come back to a whole hour on that or something. But I really appreciate time. We're gonna put anyone that's really enjoyed the conversation. They're gonna put the links to Giles underneath, and absolutely, if you found well, if you got this far, then you definitely should be signing up to his
Yeah.
newsletter, get a donate, and
And
yeah,
if you do, drop me an. You'll get an email from me. Drop me an email and tell me, that it was this conversation because
yeah,
I get people signing up all the time and I don't know where they go. And I'll send you something specific to this conversation. You can ask me for a like, oh, I liked that bit of the conversation. Have you got anything on that in particular? And I'll
yeah,
send you a freebie for that. So
fantastic. Thank you, Giles. Been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
yeah, no, thanks for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure, Scott.
You're welcome.